Okay, so I have a question regarding the initiation rituals and the existing systems out there. A lot of them are, you pay creepy old men and you buy into their system. And for a woman, that's always kind of different. So how do you feel is the way forward with magic? Like, is it still always, men in cloaks that you have to pay money to learn a magical system that you may or may not, be able to, I don't know, elevate in and advance in?
I've never been part of a magical order.
Okay.
This entire time I've been doing this, I've never been part of a magical order.
Right.
The key thing of initiation has to do with the spiritual transcendence that occurs through the process, right? The whole like dues paying system, that all just comes from Freemasonry anyway.
Yes.
Men in cloaks are cool, I like vestments, I like liturgical stuff, that's a big part of my work. But I would say the main thing with initiation is that, for example, I did learn from somebody, though. I learned from one of the leading Solomonic practitioners of our day. One of the first guys to have like really done it by the book. But it's not like I don't pay him. I hang out with him. He's one of my friends. He moved out here somewhat recently. Well, actually, I moved back home to Washington after he got out here. But whatever. Anyway, but it's like, the idea is that you have somebody who has gone before, who you receive knowledge from, that they teach you techniques, they reveal to you aspects of it that you might not have been able to get to necessarily on your own. Like a lot of the stuff that I write about in the book that I put out, the first one, From Novice to Adept, on Solomonic magic, a lot of it is stuff that we discussed years ago, which helped me kind of like break through some of the more... Oh, I should not have said that. Oops. I forget that General Society is not considered nice. Okay. But like one of them, like more... some of the they're very toxic and stupid things that like Grimoire magicians get caught up in, is like this orthodoxy to slavishly following a text without understanding what the purpose of anything is. It's just like, here is what the Greater Key of Solomon says. Therefore, I need to do this, and this, without having any clue what it's for. It works for them, but you can get a lot further once you understand the underlying principles of, say, what traditional Western spirit magic, as I prefer to refer to Solomonic magic as, the brokering with spirits and working with them to change things in your life and in the world around you. But
cool.
And there's the other side of initiation too. That's just initiation from spirits. It's too easy to get caught up on the initiation from people. Well, there is a significant side to magical work specifically that really comes from dealing with the spirits themselves, whether that's the planetary archangels or if that's your holy guardian angel. There's a lot of it that comes through working with spirits directly. If you want to be part of an initiatic organization, I would recommend finding a sacramental church of some sort that isn't too disagreeable, because it's the Christian initiatic system. Also, it harkens back to the Greek mysteries and stuff. Like the rites of baptism and confirmation. Water and oil being anointed on your head and all this stuff. They have effects on you personally. That you can't get from yourself. I would have to say that there are certain profound things that happen in that process that you can't get just by yourself. It's like for example, the baptism opens up in the Gnostic church that I'm in. We have a rite of baptism where it's the standard. I baptize thee in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. All that good stuff. And then there's all these invocations of the aeons and exorcism of the archons and all this stuff to try to give you protection against the wicked forces of the world and all that sort of stuff. Okay. And the confirmation is where you're proclaimed to Christ, because you're anointed now, according to the Gospel of Philip, after chrismation, you're no longer a Christian, but a Christ. And that's the initiation by fire through the oil.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to have the right officer to accomplish that, is the thing. And it's like, we have our own elemental initiations we do, but in that specific context, it has a different oomph to it, a certain level of oomph. I don't know how else to put it, but
Yeah. So one quick follow up, if you don't mind. So you've brought up several times. Yeah, you brought up several times like archons, and that's very and Regulus and I were speaking about this earlier. That's very Sophianic. How did the Sophianic traditions kind of intertwine with the Ptolemaic traditions? Like, can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, so I would say that the Sophianic tradition, it was continued through Catholicism with the cults of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Right.
So it's like, and Bishop Haller, the bishop of the church that I'm a part of, the Ecclesia Gnostica, he gave an amazing homily actually about that when we were visiting Los Angeles to go meet him. My wife and I went down there. I got to meet him, which is an amazing experience. He's a very special person. Tangent over here. He's 90. He's 92 years old. He's a Hungarian aristocrat whose uncle got murdered by communists. His father was almost murdered by them, but survived the attack. And he left his native land at like 15 or something, and he was part of a Cistercian seminary for a while. So he was like around the monastic tradition he was brought up Catholic, obviously. He was like part of a monastery for a while, but then he was really like taken up with Gnosticism as its own thing, and which is why he didn't continue in that system. But he has a very serious Gnostic church that maintains like traditional sacramental form blended with Gnostic ideas. But what was I saying there? Oh, his homily, he was talking about how the worship of Sophia was maintained through all the cults among the Catholics are devoted to the Blessed Virgin Mary. So I would say that it is integrated because it would have been expected to be a part of your daily life as a Solomonic practitioner. If you're practicing this form of magic back in the 16th century, when it was kind of like the height of the whole thing, a bit after Agrippa's original German work was it was written Latin, not German. The original Latin work was put out. If you had studied that and if you had your own practice that you're developing, you would have been regularly praying the rosary. You'd have been interacting with the Virgin Mary in one way or another, which is just, as Bishop Haller put it, is a manifestation of the Aeon Sophia. The whole spiritual principle that Sophia is expressed through the Virgin Mary.
Okay.
So it's like she was the physical manifestation of that. So it's like if you engage with those devotions to the Virgin Mary, then you're participating in the Sophianic tradition.
I love it.
In our church, we have our own Sophia Rosary that we pray, but I also pray the Marian Rosary too. It's a very pleasant devotion. And there are certain aspects that I think you can tap into that through the Marian devotions that you can't through strictly Sophianic devotions, where it's like you have the part where she was a physical human at one point, unlike Sophia, who has always just been an aeon. Like she's been through the great travails of having fallen into the pit and then creating Yaldabaoth and all that. But it's like, in my personal perspective, I don't think it's great to have the Sophianic devotions for spiritual purposes exclusively, rather than trying to get material aspects out of it, because I'm not so certain that aspect can understand everything that comes with the difficulty of this world. Which is one of the advantages to dealing with like saints, I guess, over archangels, though I'm still not changing my perspective. I still prefer to work with angels, but sometimes things work in very loop-de-doop-de ways dealing with celestial spirits, but yeah.
Great. Thank you. That's a perfect answer.
Well,
I'm happy to be of assistance.
Would you like to talk about some of the books you've written while you're here, so that way you can plug yourself and we can,
Oh, sure.
Yeah, brother.
All right. Well, here goes the plug. So the first book I put out took me a bit over a year to really put together because I was too piecemeal, and there are some significant changes I went through during a period of that time. Significant theological changes, so complete kind of a, I wouldn't call it a crisis of faith necessarily, but I had once converted to Hasidic Orthodox Judaism, which is how I have all the knowledge of Kabbalah and Talmudic stuff that I have in depth. I learned Hebrew and Aramaic and all that stuff, but then I was just like trying to force myself to believe in Judaism when I had been a Gnostic before. And I was just like, oh yeah, there must be something here because it's older. Therefore, there's something here. But I came to discover through my studies of the Zohar and the other Kabbalistic works and Talmud and all, basically, the majority of that corpus, it's like that they just borrowed everything from the Platonists and the Christians. And I was like, well, I'm going to the source of this instead of continuing to LARP over here. So I started the book writing as somebody who was practicing Orthodox Judaism. But then when I was like, you know what, I can just like put this in my new context instead of in this really weird part of it. So it took me over a year to put it together simply because I had to rewrite a good amount of it, and it was very piecemeal in terms of how I was working on it. But that one is called From Novice to Adept: Ascension Through Magic. And that book is basically it's an elucidation of the protocols of magical practice, particularly from the traditional Western perspective, Western spirit magic, we'll call it. I talk about the tools and what they mean, rather than giving all the formulae as exactly how to do it. Like, for example, like with the wand, it's not like I say, you need to put these exact symbols and say these magic words and all this stuff. I put a formula of consecration at the end of the book that could be used, where it's like, okay, you say these general phrases, you structure it around these, but you use your own words, because I personally think that putting your own self into your work is more important than just following something written by some other guy from like 500 years ago. But where was I going with that? Yeah, so that book was the first one I put out. It's just generally on Solomonic magic and how to actually do the work. Soon after that, I put out one called Tarot Decoded: Divination for All, which is about tarot. It's from my own experience using tarot. I give a bunch of the meanings. A lot of details are missed by people who write about tarot because they try to cram it into New Age, New Thought sort of context, rather than analyzing the symbols from the context that they were created in. Which is from the past 800 years of Western civilization. So there's very long descriptions of the major arcana. The minor arcana are given their due space as well to just analyze the imagery and what is communicated through it so that you can come to the meaning yourself, rather than saying, oh, the Two of Wands means this exact thing about, casting your bread upon the waters, or, oh, this just has to do with this thing. This means you have to research or something. It's like, well, look at the symbolism. The guy is holding a globe looking out over the water. And so this refers to this aspect of research and investigation and analysis before going on to do your project. And it also just kind of opens up things to people where it's like, you have to use your intuition. The whole purpose of tarot is not to, memorize the little white book that comes with it, but to gain the intuitive sense, to be able to interpret the cards yourself using the symbolism on each of the cards. And the last thing I put out was it's very short. It's a very brief pamphlet called Talking with Angels, a basic introduction to angelic theurgy, which was written for people who are not particularly experienced in magic at all or have much background knowledge, but gives them a sort of basic framework for angelic invocation, which I think is a crucial thing. I think that if more people were to interact with the celestial angels, things might go a little bit better in society. So it's just kind of a basic introduction to that work. And there I give a full ritual framework because, again, it's written for people who maybe are more involved with the new age and those sorts of things rather than, totally into magic already. Like people who don't have much background knowledge, basically, is who it's written for.
Where are these books located?
But it's short, it's a very quick read. Amazon.com. I can send you the link later to put in the description.
Yes, I will do that. I'm glad that you have work put out that our future listeners will be able to come and find you at. I hope that you get some sales through our video. That would be amazing.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, indeed it would. Yeah. Well, this has been. Dude, any more questions? Anything else to discuss?
Yeah. I mean, if we still have 15 more minutes in this episode, in this part of the episode.
Oh, perfect.
So. At this point, okay. Let's say free reign. Anything you want to talk about, go ahead. The floor is yours, my friend.
Ooh, all right. Here we go. I'm not really sure what to ramble on about at this point. I've been on tangents the entire time anyway. Let's see.
Okay,
I don't know.
said,
I think I would give some advice for like new practitioners or something would be to trust in themselves more than to trust in others. A lot of people like get you stuck. Okay, there we go. We're beginning with the sort of complaint from years ago. It's like a lot of the time people fall into this whole thing of being encouraged to just conjure for what's reasonable. Conjure for the job at the movie theater, conjure for the paralegal position or whatever, things like that, conjuring for minor goals. And my big piece of advice for anybody who's like new to practicing magic and stuff is to not aim for anything low, aim for the most insane stuff possible. It's a lot more fun that way. And well, when you get that sort of thing, it's nice. You conjure for your real goals rather than for something that you're not really interested in, and I would say not to settle until you get the thing that you're looking for.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you had conjured your relationship with your wife. Can you tell me how that came about? That's so interesting to me.
Oh, so back when I had first gotten started in the dating thing back in 2015, 2015, I'd had a couple girlfriends, not in like fairly quick succession, actually. The first relationship was, whatever, she just broke up with me, and I was like, oh, well, that's sad. Then the other one, there's other concerns, but basically I was just like, I don't want to do this like whole playing the field thing. I don't want to do all this stuff where it's just like getting all emotionally invested and then like it doesn't work. Because it's just not my personality. I'm somebody who at my core is always just wanted to like have one happy relationship and then not worry about it ever again. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this particular form of working where I said a chapter from the Song of Songs. I had started my my explorations of Judaism at an earlier age. So I knew Hebrew already at that point. Didn't know Aramaic till a few years later after I'd actually converted, but that's a whole other story that I don't really want to get too deep into. But basically I took a chapter of Song of Songs, sung it in Hebrew over a glass of wine every Friday night for 8 weeks. There's 8 chapters in Song of Songs. And then there's just like all this stuff started happening where they're young women who are like throwing themselves at me. And I was like, okay, you're wrong. I don't want to be involved with you. There's something that this doesn't feel right. And then I met her through church, and we just like, we got along. We became like the best of friends. We like knew each other like casually for like a couple of years already at that point. Not couple, about a year. Yeah. 2016. So yeah, it would have been 1 year roughly that we just kind of known each other a little bit from church. Then we got to be friends, and then we just like we're like basically the same person. We have complementary differences, but we're very similar to a degree that we get on incredibly well. Like we never fight. I think I can count on one hand the amount of times we fought in the past 7 years.
That's amazing.
I used this Song of Songs way of doing the conjuration for it, and I went at it with this I had friends who were like, oh, you can't like get your soulmate already, you're only like 20 years old, like come on, what are you talking about? And then I was like, whatever, I'm going for it, I'm gonna see what happens. And okay, well, here we are now.
That's amazing. No, that's a great story. So that is the song they use. I am so unfamiliar with it. So is that traditionally what that song is used for? Just kind of use it and apply a new context to it.
So if you're to look at it in like a Hasidic context, for example, it's said every Friday in the synagogue before the prayers for accepting the Sabbath and all that stuff.
Okay.
But the themes of it are very, if you take it out of that context, which is a fairly new one, actually, to be frank, it's a very Venusian song. It talks about it's written as if it was written by King Solomon, and he's talking about, it alternates between the perspective of his lover, the woman who's writing about him and singing about how beautiful he is, and he's talking about how beautiful the woman is, and this like sort of it's an amazing, like highly condensed mystery love story, I guess is how I'd put it. Like a love story of esoteric mysteries. It's very interesting. But I used it because of those themes and some hoodoo traditions. in some hoodoo traditions, it's used for Venus work as well. But I had this specific intent with it. Was I was like, I'm going to conjure my soulmate and conjure my twin flame, however you want to put it,
Yeah, that's
And
amazing.
yeah, well, it's worked really well.
Right on.
That's
awesome.
It sounds like you've given me a rabbit hole to go down. I'm going to have to look this
Indeed.
up and try to conjure myself up a loving partner. That's just
Go
my
for
equal.
it. Go for it. I highly recommend it. Yeah, I mean, you could do it all at once, but I found spreading it out over weeks ended up giving it more impact, and I use wine as a huge part of my theurgy. I use wine for all the ceremonies that I do, so that was just part of it,
Did you drink the wine, or did you just...
I read about this. Oh, yeah. Drink it afterwards, yeah.
Oh, I don't drink, so...
Drain the cup.
Beyond me. But,
oh, no.
Then it's not
I can figure out another way to do it that'll work for you. Come again?
Then that kind of plays into the role of sacrifice. It's like you take on something. You kind of like say, okay, this symbolizes, like the wine symbolizes me taking in this belief, this conjuration.
Yes. Well, it's a form of communion. That's part of why it's used in Christianity and in the old mysteries, is because it's a form of communion where you take the thing and you bring it into yourself. And Crowley writes about that in Liber Abba, the idea of the magician's Eucharist. Yeah. You have your bread and your wine that you then make into God, then bring that into you. He says, in the force of the God that you're seeking to invoke is brought into that. And it's the same sort of thing. But spreading it out that way, I found worked really well because it allowed things to ramp up rather than being all at once. Then I don't know. To be fair, I haven't had to do it again. So, I mean, maybe it could work if you do it all at once. But I think the spreading it out over weeks ends up, it's like that, because then it ends up being a theme of each week that you end up having these different energies present that orient you towards that goal. It's like the whole period of time, like each week it was like other weird stuff. And I was like, okay, no, this isn't right. I'm going to wait till I finish it. And then, well, here we are. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I've been affirming immanentize the eschaton by telesis every day for this year. At the start of this year, I've been saying that same thing on all my social medias every day. And I've noticed that same thing where every single day there's a different energy or a different person that interacts with that, and how that grows or how it changes. And also I've learned that saying those specific words in ancient Greek are not very informative to a lot of people. So I've learned to reformat that into this is a daily reminder to create heaven together through community planning and community organization, and I change it up every day to a different thing, basically.
Oh, that's great.
Yes, sir. Let's
immanentize the eschaton. Just throw that out there. The only people who will get that are like chaos magicians. All 5 people on the internet who are seriously into chaos magic are the only ones who will really get it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I found that out after the fact. I'm a researcher. I study things for fun. I read textbooks like you guys, except I read it on everything, not just one subject, not just spirituality. The entire world entices me. Everything that you could possibly have knowledge about, I want to learn about. I want to know it all the time. I can't help it. I just absorb information like a sponge. So for me personally, that's just the expression that fits,
That's an important quality to have. I mean, the thing is, Agrippa, for example, says that you have to know mathematics and philosophy, basically, the trivium and quadrivium, of humanities and the ancient sciences. You have to know those things in order to really get it. If you're ignorant about arithmetic, how the hell are you going to be able to figure out gematria? Or
one thing I've noticed.
Really, any of the rest of it.
If you don't understand the notions that were built upon to create the concept that you're learning about, you will never have a full understanding of it. You can only ever have it's not reduced, but it's a part of something that's taken away from it. There's a specific word that means it's a reduced perspective that's not a whole perspective, that you're basically creating your own understanding of something that's not based off of the understanding that it was created to have. Does that make sense? A lot of people, like for example, in
Yeah, it makes
philosophy,
sense. Like,
a lot of
very superficial.
people will learn about subjects and then write books about those subjects without ever applying these like topics to their life. Like you were talking about with
Yeah.
spirituality and certain circles reading and putting out work without practice. And I think that it is actually through the practice that the things happen. Like that's a big aspect of what we've talked
Yeah,
about.
exactly. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, the whole thing where yeah, the whole practice thing is really the main thing, I think. I mean, it applies to spirituality as well as to philosophy and everything else. You know, I wouldn't trust a mathematician who hadn't actually used Pythagorean's theorem, the
Right.
Pythagorean theorem,
So yeah, that reminds me of like I won't want to say a theory, but kind of like a idea I've had for a long time for for systemization of truth. So do you know what the epistemological process is? The process of creating justified true
yeah, I'm
beliefs.
vaguely familiar with it.
So
Yeah.
in my opinion, magic is the first like inception of a pattern in nature, right? Like you could put it as an irrational creation of the mind to create an ideal set of circumstances or to fulfill the ideal conditions. The manifestation of the mind's power over nature, in a sense. Whereas science is then the reinforcement of that pattern as a construct that can be reproduced in nature. And I believe that philosophy is the bridge between magic and science that allows patterns to become solidified in nature through the practice of applying logic to the like immediate first instant pattern that our brain created to fulfill the circumstance. What do you think about that?
Sounds fair to me. And I think it's when it comes to philosophy, I think that one of the I am somebody who finds the best thing to go fairly far back in terms of reading about just about anything. It's like I think the postmodern philosophers tend to be highly pessimistic, and they kind of miss out on a lot of the profound truths of like, say, like Platonism, right? Like the ideas of things being more real, the more transcendent they are. Like beauty is more real than ugliness, right? Because it's transcendent. It takes you out of the muck and the mire where you are now, and it orients you towards this sort of spiritual joy and enlightenment, we would say.
Would you say that orienting ourselves in the correct direction for our path is a big step in like becoming an initiate and putting our thought into practice? The like
absolutely
act of orientation.
Yep. Oh yeah, for sure. As long as you stay oriented towards the muck and the mire, you're never gonna build the Sistine Chapel. You've gotta have your eyes. You have to have your sight set on something greater than yourself and greater than your class or social class or whatever, greater than your nation, greater than anything to do with this world, to be able to really accomplish things that are amazing and beautiful. But yeah, that's definitely the first step, because if you don't have that orientation in the first place, you're not really going to have a way to direct yourself to attain those higher levels of spirituality.
So magic, in a way, helps reinforce the positive constructs that we create within ourselves and allows us to shed the negative aspects that we have created over time about our identity.
It's an essential part of the process.
Yeah.
It's an essential part of the process.
So self-actualization is I would say, the first step to becoming a successful practitioner of magic. Being able to
essentially
be the ideal version of yourself in your head, being able to rationalize that as a method of being rather than a state to accomplish.
Both and. You have to have your goal as to where you're looking to go, and you have to work on doing that now to realize that now that there is an aspect of you that you can actualize that's greater than you are currently, and even beyond yourself. It's that whole idea of there's a transcendent world beyond where we are right now that we can tap into, that we can experience, that we can see and be a part of, that really makes the work.
One way
if you
I like
just
to look
focus
at that,
on muck and mire, you can't really do it. Once you
one way I like to look at that
see the
is
greatness. That's the big thing.
imagine. So this is a concept that we can get off on tangents about, but we're almost at the end of the episode, so I don't want to get too deep. I'm just saying that if you believe in no free will, like the lack of free will, and you believe everything is deterministic, in a sense, you could imagine yourself in your future self's shoes and then work your way backwards from the future in the now. So in a sense, your self-actualization process is a place where you can already be through deterministic processes, and then you can work where you're at now towards that position, but imagine you're working backwards from there, right? And I think that's a great visualization tactic.
It is a cool visualization tactic. I'm just like, ooh, determinism. Ooh.
That's the reason I said this is something we can get deep and disagree on.
Yeah. I'm really not into determinism as an idea. It's like I really believe in free will to a very strong degree. I mean, we can make all biological arguments, but I think that there is like, for example, a hyletic would be just acting from the neurochemical perspective, right? If they don't have extra thought that goes into things, they don't have these other sides that go into things, then sure, it's deterministic after a certain point. That
could be a reductionist perspective of like the human, like plethora, like the diaphora of different humanities that exist inside of the spectrum, right? You could, that's a reductionist perspective, trying to reduce the people into three or any set of group of categories will never fully fulfill those people's characteristics. And on a reductionistic level, if like you think about life as an empiricistic system, then free will, the construct of it, necessarily exists to allow us to repeat mistakes. If that's like sin and free will are connected through our own religious systems, in the sense that we need free will in order to sin. If we didn't have free will, we wouldn't sin. So the idea is that if we choose to live without free will, then you can only deterministically do better than you did before. You can only ever grow from your mistakes. There is no choice to go back and repeat that mistake. And I think that that's like something that people who push free will don't realize about that basis of their argument, is that you're basically arguing that you get to go back and repeat mistakes rather than deterministically do better than you did. That's my personal belief.
From my own observation of how things work, we often do repeat mistakes, I think it's really common that we actually see people do make the same mistake over and over again.
If you're
they don't learn anything from it either.
If you're conscious, everything is a choice.
See, so that's what I was trying to say. The people who are unconscious, who are just functioning strictly according to biological impulse, which are what are referred to by Heletics. So we all know people who are like this, who don't put any thought into anything. They just act on the spur of the moment to go do whatever the hell that comes through their gut or below the gut. It's like that's like the first thing that comes to mind. There is like what they go and do, and that's it. There's no thinking about it at all.
Well,
I would argue that people who are in that circumstance don't necessarily have free will because they're following the deterministic thing of the deterministic, like the biological determinism, right? Where it's like, we have these neurochemicals and
I think you're turning it on its head of how it actually is.
Whereas the conscious people have true free will.
I would say it's the opposite. I would say conscious people don't have free will and unconscious people do, because in the sense that when you have free will, when you are choosing to do wrong, you are choosing to live your life without awareness. That the lack of awareness is a choice because we have brains that give us the conscious construct. Choosing not to be conscious is what makes you have free will If you are conscious, you are reacting to your environment and living in the construct that is a byproduct of our existence. We are deterministically doing what we know to be right. How can you say that you have free will to do good when you are doing good, as that's because that's your natural reaction, that's your natural process? You get what I'm saying? If you're sitting here saying that I have free will to do good, but in reality doing good is the deterministic method. Like,
the side that I would argue is that you choose to do good because you know what is good. You don't because there is a side, you know, we live in physical bodies. You know, I don't know what your personal perspective is on which part you identify with, but you know, from the Gnostic perspective, identify with the soul, right? So
yes, I'm
a ghost driving a meat machine, right? You know,
yes.
It's like so it's like. We have I wouldn't say like denying the body, being an absolute ascetic is like the good thing all the time. That's like kind of the Gnostic stereotype, but it's like the idea of like being conscious is that you can recognize like what's just an impulse, what's something not to follow, and then like ignore that and say, no, I'm going to devote this to something higher. I'm going to transmute it through personal chemical processes.
That process gives you more
which
pleasure.
Is a conscious thing. You have to be conscious.
That process gives you more pleasure for doing so. Like you have learned that you've built up the resistance to doing the impulsive action because you've learned through practice that what you do, if you do that thing later after building up the resistance to it or the resistance to giving in to yourself, that it will give you more pleasure at that moment you do it, whatever that thing is. Or if you never do it, then it will give other things more pleasure from not doing it. Like you are responding to an impulse you're responding to a stimulus in your environment that you've put there or not put there yourself in order to have a greater experience overall. That is still,
but there's still a conscious side to that.
Well, yes, I'm not saying we don't have freedom of choice.
I would say that's still conscious, though. Yeah,
I'm divorcing freedom of choice from free will. You still have the ability to choose which good action you will do, but you still think of them all as good actions.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it after a certain point, it starts to get to be more about etymology rather than the substance, I would say. I still think it's like, you know, the aspect, like Crowley, for example. I'm not even a Thelemite, but I love quoting Crowley. You know, he says, you know, you have no right to do but what thou wilt, right? You know, so there is the side where you have that will that you do have to follow, but at the same time, he acknowledges that people can choose not to follow it. You know, that people can ignore their true will.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It's one of those great contradictions of his system, you know.
That's literally what I'm saying.
So, like, if you're conscious, then you choose to follow your will, you know.
Yes.
Rather than like
so choosing to follow your will as a
follow it.
Choosing to follow your will as a conscious being is the lack of free will. That's, you literally just agreed with me with that rhetoric. Use it based on Crowley. If you choose not to follow your eternal indomitable will inside, you are allowing your free will to make you sin. That is literally the basis of what I just said.
Okay.
I gotta go back
after a certain point, it turns into etymology.
You're right. I'm sorry.
Yes,
I didn't mean to argue.
No, no. Arguing is good. Arguing is a very good thing to do. I'm not like hypersensitive, you know, all that sort of thing, but. Yeah,
this is something I feel strongly, or not even feel strongly about. It's just this is something I had a revelation, right? I believe I have a lot of I transcendentally meditate a lot, where I'll get into, I don't want to call them frenzy states because they're more like ecstatic states where I feel like joy, just extreme pure joy. And in those moments, I'll have
that's what that means. But
I'll have revelations, and this was one of those revelations that I had, like that, you know, literally. We don't need free will. We created the construct, the idea of free will, to allow us to be bad and not have to take accountability for it. Because if we have free will, we don't need to fucking do good. We can just repeat ourselves without it being a bad thing, because we're forgiven for our sins or whatever the like egregor is in the system. In reality, if we don't have free will, there is no other choice but to do good, and whatever we know good is. Whatever we've seen good is. The construct of free will doesn't need to exist. It is a human construct. It serves a purpose that some human invented it for.
I have to get going.
If we have to end, I respect your viewpoint, but I
respect yours as
respectfully
well.
disagree. Because there is the side where people do choose to do things that aren't in accordance with that principle. Even people who are spiritually awakened oftentimes will screw up in huge ways and do stuff that isn't really particularly right. That ends up being a huge mistake in a moral and practical sense. So, but I don't want to get it. Wait till next time or something. But
Thank you for your time, brother.
We'll discuss it next time.
Let me get
Thank you for inviting me onto the show.